The Fake Cop Who Targeted. The Fake Cop Who Targeted Minnesota Lawmakers. True Crime Documentary. Intro 00 to 045. What would you do if someone knocked on your door in the middle of the night wearing a police uniform? Most people wouldn't hesitate to open it. After all, police officers are supposed to protect us. But on one terrifying night in Minnesota, that trust became a weapon. A man disguised as a police officer carried out a carefully planned series of attacks that shocked the entire United States. 2 people lost their lives. 2 others barely survived. And after months of investigation and legal proceedings, the man responsible finally admitted his guilt. This is the disturbing true story of one of the most shocking attacks on public officials in recent American history. Chapter 1. A Normal Night Turns into Horror, 045 to 2. It was the early hours of June 14th, 2025. Most neighborhoods across Minnesota were silent. Families were asleep, the streets were empty. But one man was already carrying out a plan investigators would later describe as highly organized. According to prosecutors, he wasn't dressed like an ordinary criminal. He wore clothing that made him appear to be a real police officer. He also drove what looked like a police-style vehicle. To anyone looking through a window, nothing seemed unusual. His first stop was the home of Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette. When contact was made at the front door, violence erupted. Gunfire broke the silence. Both John and Yvette Hoffman were critically injured. Despite their severe wounds, they survived. For investigators, however, one terrifying question remained. Was this the end of the attack? Or just the beginning? Chapter 2. The second target, 2 o'clock to 3:20. Authorities believe the suspect wasn't finished. After leaving the first scene, he traveled to another home. This time, the targets were former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark Hortman. Once again, the disguise worked. Everything appeared normal, until it suddenly wasn't. Shots were fired. When first responders arrived, Melissa and Mark Hortman had both been killed. The shocking attack immediately transformed into a statewide emergency. 2 separate crime scenes, multiple victims, a suspect disguised as law enforcement, and no one knew where he would strike next. Chapter 3. The Massive Manhunt, 3:20 to 4:45. Within hours, law enforcement agencies from across Minnesota launched an enormous search. Roads were blocked. Neighborhoods were secured. SWAT teams searched wooded areas. Helicopters circled overhead. Investigators warned the public that the suspect could still be wearing police-style clothing. That warning created widespread fear. If someone looked like a police officer, how could anyone know whether they were real? As the search continued, authorities gathered surveillance footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence. Eventually, the manhunt came to an end. The suspect was located and taken into custody without further violence. For investigators, however, the arrest was only the beginning. Now they had to answer the biggest question of all: why? Chapter 4. Inside the Investigation, 4:45 to 6. As detectives examined the evidence, they began piecing together the timeline. Court documents described careful planning. Investigators recovered evidence that supported allegations the suspect intentionally impersonated a police officer to gain the victim's trust. Federal and state investigators worked together on the evidence physical evidence, witness interviews. Every detail helped reconstruct what happened during those terrifying early morning hours. The attacks quickly gained national attention. Security experts questioned how someone could use a fake police identity to get so close to public officials. For many Americans, the case highlighted a disturbing reality. Sometimes the greatest danger comes from someone pretending to be the person you trust the most. Chapter 5. The Guilty Plea, 6 o'clock to 7:15. Nearly a year after the attacks, the case returned to federal court. This time, something changed. Instead of continuing to fight the charges, the defendant entered a guilty plea. He admitted responsibility for the murders and related federal crimes connected to the attacks. The guilty plea spared the victims' families the emotional burden of a lengthy federal trial. However, nothing could undo what had already happened. 2 lives had been lost. 2 others would continue recovering from life-changing injuries. And an entire community would forever remember that night. Outro, 7:15 to 8. Cases like this remind us that appearances can be dangerously misleading. A uniform, a badge, a police-style vehicle. None of those things guaranteed safety. Investigators say it was planning, deception, and the abuse of public trust that made this crime especially disturbing. Although the legal process continues in some respects, one thing is no longer in question. The man responsible admitted his role in one of Minnesota's most shocking attacks on public officials. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy well-researched true crime documentaries based on real events, subscribe for more stories that examine the facts behind some of the world's most unforgettable criminal cases. Disclaimer. This documentary is based on publicly reported information and court proceedings. It is intended for educational and informational purposes and does not speculate beyond the available evidence.